Just want to make a quick point. This happened just a few weeks ago in my state, not that far away from me. I had a lot of people, family members who live in other states, other parts of the world, contacting me, wanting to know if I'm okay. And I was kind of surprised that they were asking me this because I wasn't really following the news. And I knew there was some kind of bad weather, but I didn't know it was this serious. So after the fact, I took a look and I saw the videos and I was actually shocked. Now, I say this to say if someone had asked me about how bad things were in my state, I would say like what I said. I would say it was not a big deal. It was a lot of rain, but I didn't really see anything. Everything's fine. Kind of like how many people are saying, people in Florida are saying everything's fine. I live in Florida and everything looks fine. Do not fall for the anecdotal evidence trap. Just because you didn't personally see something, it didn't influence or impact you directly, doesn't mean it's not a thing. Ignore your personal experiences. Focus on the data. Look at the numbers, look at the data, get the facts right about what's happening. Don't let the media manipulate you by only focusing on data that supports their narrative. But you do need to get to the data yourself. Do your own research, and your own research doesn't mean seek out somebody else's research, where you're going to go to a blog and someone's going to tell you their opinion, whether this is a big deal or it's not a big deal. Go to the source. If you want to know how bad Florida is doing right now, go look at the numbers. Don't go to a liberal site. Don't go to a conservative site. Go to the actual raw data and see for yourself.
It's a big thorn in the side of the narrative that you got these places who just aren't doing any of this and they're really fine. They have upticks here and there and everyone makes a big deal out of it, but overall it's like, Florida, basically since the beginning of COVID, hasn't done really demonstrably worse.
They're not wheelbarrowing corpses. If everything you were saying was true, there would be wheelbarrows of corpses and giant pits, and it would be you'd be able to instantly go, shit, we better all get this medication and stay home.
Well, look, for everything from the lockdowns and the mask mandates and now the vaccine mandates and all the vaccine passports, all of this, if this entire upheaval of our cultural norms, if it was worth it that you just have to completely abandon everything because this is such a bad threat, then you'd have to look at the places who are not.
No one is saying that you should completely abandon everything. I'm enjoying my life. I'm maintaining my relationships with family. I'm able to go outside and enjoy the things that I like to do, all the while simply following some basic mitigation guidelines that are not based on signs I see on doors. It's based on science. I've been following along. I've been listening to the science that we found about this thing and how to control it. And I use common sense to apply the science that we've learned to keep myself safe while not abandoning everything. That's the straw man argument. He's arguing against an argument that no one's making. Even the lunatics that are crazy, that are out there wearing masks outdoors, even they are not saying abandon everything.
Doing that and see that they are demonstrably worse. I mean, even if it wasn't wheelbarrowing corpses, it'd have to be something really, really bad. And you don't see that.
The hospital is unable to provide further care. Calls to hospitals in Florida and Texas to transfer him out, all coming back with the same answer: no beds. Yet Kim says her family is holding on to hope that a spot will eventually open.
Right, anywhere closer to Texas or any open facility that can take him, that knows how to treat him.
In San Antonio, BAMC provides ECMO treatment, but says it's at capacity. Methodist Hospital is another. A spokesperson did not get back to us tonight to say if they had room to provide the specialized treatment.
I did not get vaccinated. I'm not anti-vax. I was just trying to do my research. I was scared.
Her sister, Christina Blankenbiller, tells me less than a week later, she was on a ventilator. Less than 2 weeks after this video was posted, she died from COVID.
More than 13,000 people are in the hospital battling COVID-19. That is a drop of 159 patients from the day prior. The number of new COVID-19 cases went up from Monday to more than 16,000. Now in Palm Beach County, 184 adults are hospitalized, and there are 6 pediatric admissions.
In the wrong direction when it comes to kids and COVID. And doctors and nurses at TGH, they say it's heartbreaking to see. So they're sharing stories from inside the Children's Medical Center, urging people to take action.
We are putting our children at risk, and we are calling on all of you to stand up and help us. Please protect our children.
According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, about 252,000 kids tested positive for COVID just this past week. That's the largest number of child cases in a week since the pandemic began. Now, while pediatric ICUs have not seen as many deaths, cases are typically not as severe. Hospitals are now seeing more children with COVID and more children being admitted to the ICU. And medical experts, they worry the situation will keep getting worse if people do not protect themselves.
We are at our highest cases. The community masking and social measures are not up to the mark. The holiday was much needed relief for many, but we continue to see cases come in, and we're seeing younger individuals in the hospital, and our length of stay for people is quite high. So we might see cases come down, but that's because folks have completed their isolation period in the hospital. What we don't obviously notice is that they're continuing to get care in the hospital and they are getting care for COVID. It just doesn't show up in the hospitalization number. So that's one thing to be mindful of when we see these hospitalization numbers coming down. We still have packed ICUs. I think there's a glimmer of hope there, but there's also some concern with the Labor Day weekend and with other gatherings happening and vaccinations not increasing as much as we hoped they would.
They were kind of right in the middle of the pack. It's kind of like how the same, and that has got to just really stick in their side.
Now, if he made this statement 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, he would have some kind of point. Because factually speaking, for all the talk about DeSantis being crazy and this and that and what they're doing and all the hysteria from the media, Florida versus California, the numbers weren't that much different. There were some differences for sure, but there wasn't, like he's saying right now, there wasn't like a massive, like, man, Florida, California's bad, but look at Florida. It was not on that level. And considering that you have a lot of senior population there, you would think it would be an absolute slaughter, an absolute bloodshed. But it wasn't. And there's more reasons for that than what people like him would be honest about. Because some of what kept the numbers from going too crazy is we the people, right? You can make a mandate, you can not make a mandate, but ultimately we the people are going to decide what we feel comfortable with. So people in Florida were, some of them, actually following guidelines, actually being safe, and that actually helped to keep the numbers down, right? We can't look at whether there's a mandate or not, because you go to a place like New York that has a mandate, and you have many people that don't really follow the mandate, and they didn't really enforce the mandate, so the results that we get are not of people that were just mandated, right? Having an official mandate versus what the people actually do is not the same thing. So just like how Florida has a mandate, but then a lot of people betray the mandate, Florida doesn't have a mandate, but a lot of people choose to self-mandate, right? But regardless, the point is the Florida numbers were not drastically different from the California numbers, but if you listen to the media, you wouldn't get that, right? So that was a legitimate thing. That was a legitimate tribal bubble thing of going after DeSantis and smearing him. Now, there's definitely some stuff to criticize about him for sure. I definitely have some serious issues with DeSantis. But much of what they were saying was just partisan politics, like that 60 Minutes smear piece that they did against him. However, this is September 2021. To say that Florida is fine now? Wow. So on this channel, this is about facts and data, not about feelings and beliefs. So here is New York City that went back to late March numbers. You can see a rise right there. This is late March numbers, pretty much where they went to recently. flatlined about August 15th. Haven't really risen much beyond that. In comparison, we can take a look at Florida, or Florida, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Massive difference. They are hitting record highs. Florida has never been this bad. In comparison, as you saw, New York only went back to late March. They've been much higher. So things seem to be under control in New York City. I wonder why. Now, in the beginning, obviously, New York City got hit very hard because of their proximity to international airports and also the way people are packed in like sardines in their trains and buses and apartment buildings. Florida has a lot more space. People are driving in their own vehicles, so they should be nowhere near New York City, but yet they're blowing them out of the water. And yet this guy just said that Florida is fine and they're middle of the pack. This is not middle of the pack. Breaking records, doubling your highest wave is not middle of the pack. This is not fine. Now, if I'm a right-wing propagandist, what I will trick you with is I'll say, oh, but that's just the cases. People are trying to distract you with cases, but look at the deaths. Deaths lag cases. So initially, when the cases started rising, a right-wing propagandist would tell you, oh, it's not a big deal because the deaths are low, because the deaths were initially low. See, the deaths were low up until July 31st. Take a look at the cases July 31st. So July 31st, you had already seen a large spike. So somebody like a Shapiro or a Crowder or a Tim Pool at this time probably was saying, oh, it's fear mongering, blah, blah, blah. Because even after over a year of this stuff, they still don't get, or they are pretending not to get, the fact that deaths will lag cases. So when you see cases spiking like this, you can't immediately look at the deaths and say, oh, okay, well, the deaths aren't really moving, because you know the deaths are going to come a few weeks later, right? This is not the first time. This is the third wave. Who doesn't get this by now? But again, you can look and see the deaths. They are breaking records. This is the highest their deaths have ever been, has been about 219. So this is when left-wing media was going out to Florida. Oh, they're not following procedures and blah, blah, blah. And DeSantis is killing people and da-da-da. Now, he certainly made mistakes, just like I think just about everyone in this country made mistakes. He certainly had made more mistakes than many others, but not to the degree that left-wing media was presenting it as. And the numbers show that, right? They got the initial spike. They got the next spike. Considering the amount of older people that live in Florida, and considering the, not really embracing, social distancing and lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, these numbers are very low, which do not match the left-wing narrative. But that was then. This is now. They are breaking their records compared to where they were before. How does one look at September 2nd, 1,338 deaths, 7-day average 325 in Florida? How does one look at that? And then look at New York, populated New York, tiny apartment New York, subways running New York, 18 deaths. How do you look at this and say that Florida is in the middle of the pack? That's not even remotely true. Look at how flat New York is. New York is back to 16 deaths. They are back to early March. They're back to early March numbers as far as deaths. While Florida is breaking records, and not just by a little bit, as Trump would say, by a lot. They're massively breaking records, but yet this guy's talking about they're fine. Look at New York cases. They flattened the curve way before they got into any. Look what they were before. Way before any of this. They are back in late March numbers, in the middle of the worst wave. Delta is far more contagious than what we had before. So it's something that's far more contagious. New York is chilling. New York is the way he described Florida. New York is fine, right? This is fine. Could be better. But relative to Florida, relative to Texas, relative to a lot of these red states, New York is fine. They're not running out of beds. Look at Texas. Texas is heading, they're not breaking records. So even Texas is not doing as bad as Florida, right? They're doing bad, but they are below their highest peak. Not that much below it, but they're below their highest peak for cases. Look at the deaths. That's pretty high. A little bit lower than the highest peak. That's where they're at. This is not middle of the pack. Again, remember, New York was flat. Nothing going on as far as deaths. California at one point was like the epicenter of this whole thing. What are they doing? They got nothing. Nothing's going on. This is like the bizarro universe, right? You look at fire and you say it's cold. You look at ice and you say it's hot. And your audience sits there and nods their head. Yeah, Florida's fine. Nothing's going on in Florida. Meanwhile, the data shows the complete opposite. Right? This is not opinion or how I feel. These are the numbers. This is the data. This is not a political blog. I'm not showing you some liberal blog that says, oh my goodness, the red states, blah, blah, blah. This is just raw data. California is chilling. Look at California. California was out of control. They were once the epicenter. And here's an interesting thing for you to realize. The same people who are having problems acknowledging that Florida and Texas are out of control right now, they didn't have that problem when New York and California were out of control. Notice that. When New York was out of control and California was out of control, these people weren't sitting there and saying, no, New York is fine. There's nothing wrong. California's fine. There's nothing wrong with, there ain't nothing wrong with California. Everything's fine. No, they weren't saying that. They were saying, look, all this masking and whatever, and look at California. So when California's out of control, you acknowledge the data and the facts. When Florida and Texas are out of control, all of a sudden, you flip it. No, they're fine. Everything's fine. Look, there's this one hospital or these 6 hospitals out of thousands that they have beds, right? I'm going to ignore the ones that don't have beds. I'm going to ignore all the craziness that's going on in Florida, and I'm just going to focus on people who are fine or areas that are fine, as if anyone's suggesting that the entire state of Florida is out of beds. No one said that. No one. And again, I go back to my analogy I gave before, where, not analogy, this really happened, where massive flooding close to me, yet my family and friends around the world are telling me about it, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Just a little bit of rain. Then I go check on the news, and I'm like, oh, okay. Because it didn't flood like that where I'm at. I definitely got a lot of rain. Some water came in the door down below, but I only got like maybe a quarter inch or whatever. I'm like, okay, it's a little... it's a little bit much, but nothing to worry about. But then I go online and I see people's cars under the water, people's homes under the water. And even though I'm the one who lives here, if you ask me, I would have been like, oh, everything's fine, without checking the news. Because I only know about my experiences. I only know what I know. I don't know in terms of what's happening in the entire state. So there's people in Miami who are fine, who don't see anything. There's people all over Florida who will tell you they're fine, everything's fine, nothing's going on, right? But we can't go based on anecdotal evidence. We have to look at the actual data for the entire state and compare it to other states. And we have to acknowledge the facts. We look at the numbers and see what the numbers show, and you got to go based on that, not on what you feel, right? California was out of control. New York was out of control. Now Florida and Texas are out of control, right? Right. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate Me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. Don't believe the hype.